So firstly, for me, spirituality is about, to use Sam Harris's book title, waking up. I prefer to speak of showing up fully, authentically, and courageously in our lives and relationships. And by this, I mean being fully and authentically present and engaged with our own lives and the people in our lives. Spirituality is about being mindful, being aware of what makes life more meaningful, rich, fulfilling, and deep. It's also about transcending our obsession with ourselves, our perspectives, our needs, our preferences, and our lives. It's about living fully and vibrantly, or to use a phrase that Jesus used in the Gospel of John, spirituality is about growing into an increasingly abundant life. Hello everyone, I'm John from EvoFaith. I used to be a pastor in a large Christian denomination, but over the years my relationship with the church became so complicated that I knew it was time for us to break up. Now I'm the founder and host of EvoFaith, a new evolution of spiritual community that is open, inclusive, affirming, and welcoming. If your relationship with the church is complicated, or if you've broken up with church, then EvoFaith will help you to create your own customized, evolving, and evolutionary spirituality so that you can show up fully, authentically, and courageously in your life and relationships. And this is the EvoFaith podcast. Welcome. In this episode, I want to talk about spirituality. What is it? How does it relate to religion? Is it still relevant or valuable? And why would you need spirituality or spiritual practice anyway? And I'm hoping that the conversation today will inspire you to ask some questions about your own thoughts and experiences around spirituality. And that maybe those thoughts may help you to be a little more intentional in your life. So let's jump in. A few months ago, I was chatting with a friend about what I called spirituality. He responded and told me that he finds the word spirituality unhelpful. For him, it is still too associated with institutional religion. In fact, he said that he felt that spirituality was the domain of religious institutions. I wasn't really surprised by this. I suspect that lots of people, especially those who've broken up with church, feel the same way. But I wasn't sure what word or words we could use instead of spirituality. My friend and I chatted a bit about that, but we couldn't really find anything that fitted, or at least not for me. After that conversation, I started thinking about the idea of spirituality and how it sounds to different people. And I'm convinced that for many people, my friend is probably right. It sounds religious. It sounds like something to do with God. But what if you've broken up with religion? And what if you're not sure about God? Or maybe you've come to the conclusion that God doesn't exist? Does that mean spirituality is irrelevant or useless to you? Well, maybe not. I've been reading Sam Harris's book, Waking Up. You probably know that Sam Harris is one of the four horsemen of what is known as New Atheism, along with Richard Dawkins, Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett. So Harris is not about God or religion. And yet he is very much committed to spirituality. And he makes a pretty strong case for attaining the language of spirituality. This is what he says. There is no other term, apart from the even more problematic mystical or the more restrictive contemplative, with which to discuss the efforts people make through meditation, psychedelics, or other means to fully bring their minds into the present, or to induce non-ordinary states of consciousness. And no other word links the spectrum of experience to our ethical lives. And so in the light of that, I'm going to keep using the word spirituality here on the EvoFaith podcast, at least for now. But I want to be clear that I'm not talking about religion. And while I believe that some people will include some concept of and relationship with God in their spirituality, that's not compulsory. or at least it's not in my perspective. So what do I mean when I talk about spirituality? In the rest of this episode, I want to share a few thoughts as a kind of overview of how I define and experience spirituality. In the next few weeks, I'll expand those ideas to give a more detailed, big picture view of spirituality. And then for the next few months, I'll be exploring the different elements in my view of spirituality in greater depth. So firstly, for me, spirituality is about, to use Sam Harris's book title, waking up. I prefer to speak of showing up fully, authentically, and courageously in our lives and relationships. And by this, I mean being fully and authentically present and engaged with our own lives and the people in our lives. Spirituality is about being mindful, being aware of what makes life more meaningful, rich, fulfilling, and deep. It's also about transcending our obsession with ourselves, our perspectives, our needs, our preferences, and our lives. It's about living fully and vibrantly, or to use a phrase that Jesus used in the Gospel of John, spirituality is about growing into an increasingly abundant life. How does this resonate with you, if at all? Do you find spirituality a helpful or unhelpful word? And how does your definition and experience of spirituality differ from or align with mine? Feel free to leave a comment and share your perspective. Now, how does this view of spirituality relate to religion? Well, firstly, spirituality does not equal religion, and religion does not equal spirituality. It's totally possible to be devoutly religious and not be practicing anything that can honestly be called spirituality. It is also possible to engage deeply with spirituality and not be religious in any way. Of course, it's also possible to be both non-religious and non-spiritual. And finally, it's possible to be both deeply religious and deeply spiritual. But regardless of what our relationship with religion and spirituality may be, it's important to recognize that they are two completely different things. In my experience, which includes being in ministry for almost 40 years and ordained for half of that time, religion is primarily about being part of a particular community, organization, or institution of belief, worship, or liturgy and practice. I know there are exceptions, but generally, and especially when it comes to the mainstream religions, I think this is pretty accurate. Generally, religions include doctrines or ideas about key points of faith that devotees need to conform to and believe. Those who reject the ideas of their religion are generally considered to no longer be part of that religion, even though they may continue to participate. Religions also include a set of norms and expectations around behavior, belief, societal roles, gender, sexuality, and ethics, among other things. So essentially, religions are cultures. Spirituality can happen within a religious context, but religion and faith are not necessary to experience and practice spirituality. Rather, spirituality, from my perspective, is about living intentionally or on purpose, rather than just letting life happen to us. It's about seeking meaning, not just for ourselves, but in response to life's big questions. What is a good life? How do we build a world that is kinder and more humane for everyone, and in which everyone can have a good life? What is the meaning and importance of love, life, suffering, and death? How do these big realities impact our place in the universe and how we live? Working with these questions and seeking to live a more meaningful and intentional life does not require us to believe in a God. And they allow for lots of different ways of thinking about God or not God, the universe, and ourselves. So do you experience and practice spirituality? If so, how do you do that? What value does it bring to your life, if any? How do you see the relationship between spirituality and religion? And again, I'd be grateful if you would share your thoughts in the comments or drop me a note on social media or via email. So as a final thought, My experience is that spirituality has an openness and freedom that can sometimes be found in religion, but rarely. And the value of authentic spirituality is in how it empowers us to live on purpose and not just be mindlessly carried along by circumstances and events. It enables us to connect more deeply with ourselves, with others, with the world, and with something bigger than ourselves. Call it God or the cosmic consciousness or spirit or whatever works for you. In the next episode of the EvoFaith podcast, I'll be exploring why everyone is spiritual and why our best lives can only be found within some kind of spiritual, but not necessarily religious framework. And that's it for today's episode. I really hope that it has you thinking a bit more deeply about spirituality and its place in your life. I hope it inspires you to be more intentional about showing up fully, authentically, and courageously in your life and relationships. And I hope you'll join me next week as we continue this conversation. If you're watching this episode on YouTube, please subscribe, activate notifications, like and share this video. If you're listening on a podcast platform, please subscribe, rate EvoFaith, and tell others about it. It all helps to spread the word so that this podcast can be found by others who want to be part of this conversation. You can also connect with me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and you can find more content at evofaith.com. I hope to see you on one of those platforms. So thank you for listening, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.